The small town where I reside has its quirks. Most locales boast a post office operational during daylight hours with regular mail deliveries. Here, however, we have a night post office. My most harrowing night commenced when I accepted a job there. On my inaugural shift, I pulled into an eerily empty parking lot facing the desolate building. The unlocked entry doors beckoned me inside. "Hello, anyone there?" I called out into the cavernous silence. No response. I ventured to the main counter and found a note positioned squarely in the center. "Hi, Carl. I trust your first shift will proceed smoothly. Knowing your prior experience with night shifts at a gas station, you must be prepared for the solitude and monotony. However, this small town operates a bit differently. How many places hire a night guard for a post office? I wish I could offer more insight, but the peculiarity of this town defies explanation. You'll understand once you experience it firsthand. I'll spare you the history of this quaint locale. You're here for financial gain, and unless you're a fool pretending otherwise, your safety is paramount to me. Thus I urge you to heed this list of rules closely. Number 1. Never under any circumstances leave the post office between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Number 2. Don't look at the trick-or-treaters. Number 3. If you use the bathroom, wait 15 minutes before returning to the main desk. Number 4. When Fergus delivers the mail at midnight, thank him. Number 5. Never open the packages. Number 6. Don't answer the phone even if I call. And number 7. If I turn up before 6 a.m., hide in the freezer. Good luck, Mr. Black. That was the note my employer left me before my first shift at the night post office, and he hit the nail on the head. What kind of a place hires a night worker for a post office? He didn't really answer the question. I assumed my job was mostly a mail sorter and security guard, but there seemed to be more to it. Trick-or-treaters that snorted. It's April. That's what stood out to me, but I wasn't really paying attention, yet. The first couple of hours passed without incident. It looked to be a very dull job. I considered quitting after my first shift was over, but as I would soon learn, there are things far worse than boredom. Far worse. A few minutes before midnight, the phone rang. Now, obviously I didn't answer. That was Mr. Black's sixth rule. And I only knew he was the one calling because when I didn't pick up, he left a voicemail. "Carl," his voice rang out, "mind picking up so we can talk about the job a little more?" I ignored that, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Why would Mr. Black tell me not to answer the phone, even if it was him? That was all I could think about for the next 10 minutes or so. I picked up the list of rules and read it again. Don't answer the phone, even if I call it raid. Those were his exact words. So why was he calling? It seemed strange, but I chalked it up to a strange management style. Probably a test, I muttered to myself. He wants to see whether I have what it takes to follow rules. And then the phone rang again. "Carl, Mr. Black growled in a distorted voice. "It's rude to ignore people. Rude people get their just desserts." A loud crashing sound jolted me out of my seat. Through the glass pane at the front of the post office, I saw a black shape move out of sight across the street. My heart was pinging around inside my chest like pinball, and I was struggling to find some kind of explanation. No employer would try to scare their employee, would they? And then there was a knock on the back door. I rose to my feet and headed towards the back of the post office, unlatching the back door. And there, standing like a sinister silhouette, was a tall man in a hooded jacket. Fergus, he didn't say anything, just held out his arms, which carried a large cardboard box. I shakily took the package. His face was shadowed in darkness under his hood. For a moment I thought I saw solid black, where the whites of his eyes should have been, but I convinced myself that the night was just playing tricks on me. I backed slowly away from the man, and I almost forgot the fourth rule. When Fergus delivers the mail at midnight, thank him. I cleared my throat. "Thank you, Fergus," I said. The man said nothing but seemed happy with his payment of gratitude. He walked away. And to this day, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't thanked him. A few more hours came and went. Sort of past the time, I decided to explore the post office. It was actually quite a large building, only one floor but separated into numerous rooms. I hoped that would answer some of my questions. And they did. First I wandered into the mail sorting room, keeping the door open so I could watch the main desk. It was a messy shambles of a space. Whoever worked there during the day had left this place a mess. I started to wonder whether Mr. Black and I were the only employees. I searched through the files, the folders stacked up in tall piles on the desk. There was this mountain of documents, but when I looked closer, I realized that they were covered in scribbled lines and squiggles, fake documents, like they were trying to fool someone. There was only one real piece of information in there, a notebook at the bottom of the pile, belonging to John Glass. Just what I was hoping to find, something from the past night shift worker, filling a vacancy. And thankfully, the previous worker had left something for me in his notebook. It was a more thorough list of rules. This is what it said. Hey, new hire. If you find yourself reading this, then I apologize. You're in hell. You don't even know me yet. And if they needed to replace me with someone new, well, it doesn't look good for me. Huh. Sorry. You don't even have the foggiest clue as to what I'm talking about. Or maybe you do. Maybe you've already seen some of the horrors I'm about to tell you. Let's talk a little more clearly about Mr. Black's rules. Number 1, never, under any circumstances, leave the post office between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. If you walk out of that door before 6 a.m., you die, okay? The town isn't safe at night. But we'll get to that. I just wanted to tell you that this rule is about more than keeping your job. It's about keeping your life. Number 2, don't look at the trick-or-treaters. A trio of hooded children in masks who visit every night. If you haven't met them yet, you will. And I am so sorry, there's no escaping them. Pray they don't remove their masks. If they do, just don't look them in the eye. And if you do, make sure they don't see you. If you make eye contact, they will convince you to invite them in, and they won't leave, not until they get their treats. Number 3, if you use the bathroom, wait at least 15 minutes before returning to the main desk. Let's just say the thing in the packages, which I'll talk about soon, is adventurous, and it's best to leave it alone when it finds its way out. But if you wait for 15 minutes, it'll find its way back into the parcel. It always does. And then it's safe to enter the main post office area. Just don't interfere with it, okay? And that ties into rule number 5. Rule number 4, when Fergus delivers the mail at midnight, thank him. Yeah, Fergus, he delivers the package, the only item we ever receive. It's what's changed him. Changed the order of us, I guess. You know, it's time to finally talk about my mistake. Even if nobody ever reads this, I need to confess. Rule number 5, never open the packages. Okay, so here we are. You probably should have done your research on this place. But I don't blame you. Easy work for great pay. You'd have to be a fool to turn that down. But that isn't normal for a post office now. Is it? Crazy money like that? And I think you'll know what I'm talking about, who I'm talking about, Mr. Black himself. But it's not all his fault. It's mine too. You see, Mr. Black's night post office delivers one item and one item only. Every single package contains this item. And it's delivered to the exact same address. This is a private post office. I know this is very strange for a business that delivers mail, but Mr. Black is paid a fortune by someone. He only needs one client. As for the one item, I can't tell you what it is. I can only tell you what it does. You see, the reason these rules exist is that I messed up. Several months ago, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened one of the packages. And what I found inside, well, I'm not going to describe it because you're never going to look at it. Okay? Don't ever open the parcels. Just know that it changed this town. It showed me things, mesmerized me. And I started selling it to people in town. I took my cut from each of the parcels. It was an evil thing to do. I know it. It changed me. This corrupted me to my core. I only used it once, but I've never been the same. And the rest of the town. I got them hooked on the stuff. It's like I said, I don't want to talk about it. Never touch it. And you won't have to worry. The point is that I got them hooked. They were no longer human. And now they flock to this place. Every night they come to the post office hoping to have a little taste of what's in those packages. That's why Fergus himself has changed. But he's not the worst. If he were, he'd have slit my throat a long time ago and stolen every parcel in this place. So what's your job description? What do you have to do at the post office? Other than accept mail from Fergus and leave it in the sorting room. You have to guard this place. Guard the parcels from them. The townsfolk, it's Mr. Black's horrible secret. The things he sells to some unknown buyer, packages. Packages from hell itself. I don't know why he kept me on. After I betrayed his trust. Maybe he doesn't want his secret getting out. Maybe he has something horrible in store for me. All I know is I can't bring myself to quit. I can't leave this place. Maybe, unlike the rest of the town, I'm drawn to what's in those packages. I don't want to leave. Number 6, don't answer the phone even if I call, and that's what brings us to the next point. Phone calls from Mr. Black, the boss himself, was fine. The thing that pretends to be him, not at all. A thing that offers a fate worse than death. I don't fully understand him, but I do know that you shouldn't ever answer the phone. It started after I released this plague upon the town. Mr. Black says he doesn't know the identity of his imposter, but I think he's lying. I wish I could tell you more, but I don't have all the answers. I'm sorry. Rule number 7, if I turn up before 6 a.m., hide in the freezer. If Mr. Black and Pastor show up at the post office's front door, get in the freezer, lock the door, and wait until your shift ends. Forget the packages, your life is more important. Look, I'm sorry you were lured into this place. If you make it out of his shift alive, don't ever come back. Don't be a fool like me. I can't leave this place. If it's changed me. I hope that nobody ever needs to read this notebook. I hope I work here until I'm too old to work anymore. But if you found this, it means I can no longer play by the rules and stay safe. You can be optimistic about my fate if that makes you feel better. But the truth is, I'm probably dead. Sincerely, John Glass. I dropped the notebook onto the desk. I tried to tell myself that he must be a disturbed individual. But I thought about the list of rules. Weird phone calls, any odd interaction with Fergus more than anything else. I thought about the strangeness of the sorting room. The scattered documents full of ink-drawn scribbles, printed documents with no writing. Something was very off about this post office. I knew that even before the awful things began. And the awful things began with a knock on the door. I could hear banging on the window in the main post office area, but I was too scared to leave the sorting room. And then came the giggling. The giggling of children. I thought of a rule, the rule that made me chuckle when I first read it. It didn't seem quite so funny now, after John's more detailed explanation of what to expect. I scooped up the notebook, ignoring the banging on the glass pane, and I read his entry again. Don't look at the trick-or-treaters. They won't leave. Not until they get their treats. Worried, I glanced at my watch. It was a little after 4 a.m., just 2 more hours, I thought, 2 more hours, and it'd be all over. I could leave that town and never look back. Maybe John and Mr. Black were oddballs who wanted to prank the newcomer, but I didn't care. I'm not proud. I would happily leave and never come back. I had no problem with that at all. Easing the door open, I peered out. I could see the trick-or-treaters at the door, 3 children, each around 5 feet tall. But they hadn't seen me yet. I know the rule said not to look at them, but John said it would be fine as long as they didn't see me. Well, he didn't say we'd be fine, but I felt like I had to look. I had to make sure they weren't going to get in to make a treat. One kid wore a pumpkin mask, the other 2 wore Dracula masks. They had on long black cloaks, and I was glad that I couldn't see their faces. I only needed to worry if they removed their masks. But then I bumped into a desk, and I sent a stack of folders clattering to the floor. All 3 heads swiveled in sharp, rapid unison to the sorting room doorway, eyeballing me through the slits of their masks. The 3 children lifted their hands up to remove them. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. In the dim light of the lamppost on the sidewalk, I could make out the faces of the 3 children. Terrifying smiles, curled up all the way to their ears. And those eyes, those awful, awful eyes. I finally realized that, like Fergus, the people of this town had completely black eyes. Right. Yes, the pumpkin child said in that unhinged, distorted voice. I'd love to come inside, Mr. Postman, just open the door. Our limbs moving by themselves. It was like I was puppeteered by the demonic children. I found myself crossing the post office's main area, straight for the door. My lips wouldn't budge. I wanted to scream for help. I wanted the clock to magically strike 6. But none of that happened. I flipped the latch, unlocking the front door. And just as I did, I regained control of my body. The ringleader's bony hand curled around the handle, and his smile widened as he pushed the door open. Trick. Okay, mister. Postman, he laughed, sliding his fingers toward me through the open crack of the doorway. I turned and sprinted for the bathroom, screaming at the top of my lungs, and when I made it inside one of the stalls, I locked the door behind me. Giggles erupted from the main post office area, and I heard the sounds of childish chaos in the sorting room. One of the children entered the bathroom, peering at me between the cracks, peering at me with one of her black, lifeless eyes. I don't know what happened outside, but I know that it didn't stop when the 3 children finally left, packages in hand. Sounds continued from the main post office area, different sounds, and that's when I remembered one of the other rules on Mr. Black's list. If you use the bathroom, wait at least 15 minutes before returning to the main post office area. I thought about what John wrote in his notebook, the parcels. The things inside them slipping free to explore the post office. I didn't look, but I wanted to. I wanted to see what it turned the town into, such a place of horror. But I knew if I did, it would be like opening Pandora's box. There'd be no going back. Like John, I would die. Maybe not tonight, but eventually. After all, whatever was in those packages, it was enough to keep him here, knowing that sooner or later it would kill him. All I know is that the sound from beyond the bathroom door was something that shook my bones, not the slithering or squelching of some black sludgy substance. That's what I pictured when I stared into the children's eyes. No, it was a scraping sound, the sound of chalk against the blackboard, or the sound of a child screaming through a warped telephone, or maybe not, or the house, because it was like nothing I'd ever heard. Even after I stopped and I was sure the thing had returned to its package, I still waited for another 10 minutes just to be safe. And when I returned to the main desk, the clock on the wall showed that it was 5 a.m., 1 more hour to go. But you already know how that night ended, don't you? I knew how it would end to 6 rules. I had learned the importance of 6 rules on that list. But there were 7 rules, and what was the one rule that I had yet to use? If I turn up before 6 a.m., hide in the freezer. And by some psychic connection, Mr. Black answered that for me. Well, the thing pretending to be him answered. Carl, he said. The voice jolted me from my position, slumped in the desk chair behind the reception area. I jumped up and looked at the man in the road. Standing in the dawning light was a man terrifying enough to strike fear into anyone's heart. It looked like the man who'd interviewed me, and yet it looked nothing like him. 6 foot tall, gray trench coat, gaunt face, and black eyes, of course. He didn't smile like the children. He did not offer a neutral, emotionless face like Fergus. No, instead he offered a gaping mouth hanging low, as if it might swallow me. From beyond the window he stood and watched. And then eventually, "Why didn't you answer my call, Carl, Mr. Black's demented doppelganger asked. "You have a parcel for me." Before waiting for an answer, the man's arms grew, stretching unnaturally long. It moved toward the bottom of the glass door. I saw its long, slender fingers as black as his eyes curl beneath the bottom of the door, working their way inside the post office. I strained as his arm worked its way up to the door handle from the inside and unlocked it. Unlike the children, Mr. Black needed no invitation. And that's when I understood Rule 7. If I turn up before 6 a.m., hide in the freezer. It was the only room in the post office with a lock, and I ran for it. I didn't want to look at him. I just kept my eyes fixated on the freezer door ahead of me, fumbling with the handle. I heard a whimper from behind me like a wounded animal, but I didn't fall for it. I didn't turn to see it. I knew I only had seconds before Mr. Black reached me, so I flung the freezer door open and I slammed it shut behind me. Just for a moment as the freezer door closed, I caught a glimpse of a horror that I can't even put into words. Mr. Black's doppelganger looked nothing like him. He'd morphed into a colorless being with dozens of gangly spider-like limbs. When 6 a.m. arrived, I hightailed it out of there, never to return. I never spoke to Mr. Black again. And for the record, I don't believe him. I agree with John. He knows more than he says. I have so many questions, but the biggest one of all is what is in those packages. I used to work the night shift at a gas station on the side of some highway in the country. From the hours of 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. the road was pretty dead. I would have maybe 1 or 2 people come in to pay cash in a whole night. It was a very boring and depressing job, especially doing the graveyard shift, but I had just finished college and needed to pay off my loans. The only reason I kept this job was because my boss threw me an extra $5 an hour for doing the night shift. On this one cold December night, I was doing my usual thing, reading the newspaper, playing games on my phone, and whatnot when I noticed the headlights of a car pulling off the highway into the parking lot. It was a red pickup truck. Somebody stepped out and shut the door. I went back to reading the paper as I saw that he was standing by the gas pump. I assumed he wasn't paying cash. I looked up a few moments later and saw that he was still standing in the same position, staring at the gas pump. I almost felt obligated to go out and help him. He was obviously confused. I felt a cold chill run up my spine as I saw the 6-foot-something tall man slowly turn his head to face me. I couldn't make out any features of his face, but I knew he was staring at me. I tried to pretend I didn't notice by going back to reading the paper. Of course, I wasn't really reading now. I was a bit shaken by the guy out there. I just wanted him to pay debit or credit and leave. I looked up and gasped as the man was now much closer to the front door of the building. It wouldn't have been so disturbing if it weren't for the fact that he wasn't moving. He was just standing still as before, still looking in my direction. I walked over to the door to get a closer look. All I could see in his face was still blackness. I locked the door and flipped the open sign to closed. Locking the door without proper cause could possibly get me in trouble, but I was not taking a chance because, quite frankly, I was scared shitless. I walked back behind the counter and sat down on one of the containers on the floor, just so I couldn't see the man outside anymore. I stayed in that position for a good 5 minutes, texting every friend I had to see who was awake. I was desperate to tell somebody about this. When I finally got up to check that he was gone, I let out a full scream as the man was now right outside the door. I picked up the phone on the counter and called the police. The operator was reluctant to send somebody over because of the way I described the situation, but I persuaded them. I hid behind the counter, balled up like a child. I began to hear heavy thumps at the door, not innocent knocks to catch my attention. I mean thuds and thumps trying to break down the door. And then, eventually it finally stopped. I heard the sound of a car starting outside and then driving off. I looked outside and he was gone. A patrol cop, along with a state trooper, pulled into the parking lot. I reported the red pickup truck and told them which direction I thought he went in. I couldn't describe his face as all I saw was blackness. Of course, there wasn't much the police could do as the man didn't really do anything. I left that job a few months later for a job in the city. I was working the night shift at my local grocery store, back when it used to be open 24 hours a day. There would normally be less than 10 customers throughout my shift, but I wouldn't get to sit around and do nothing. They wanted me to work on stock when I wasn't helping a customer. It was a bigger store, so often there may have been one other person in the building, whether it be someone working on stock or someone cleaning. This night I was the only one working. I was stocking in the cereal aisle when I heard something fall over on the other side of the shelf in the next aisle over. I would always hear the door to the store sliding open. It was the loudest thing ever, so it caught me off guard that there might have been a customer in the building. Of course, it wasn't weird yet, not until I looked to my left and saw a man standing by the edge of the aisle, shooting me a blank stare. "Do you need something, sir?" I asked him. "No, but could you just point me to the eggs?" he said. He wasn't normal looking. His face looked weird, not exactly ugly, just unusual. His upper lip kind of came out too far, almost like a Simpsons character. I was a bit uncomfortable that I had to deal with ringing him up. I hurried to finish the cereal aisle, and when I was done, I began to bring the U-boat cart to the back room. I was stopped halfway when the same guy cut me off through the middle section of the aisle. I want to note this guy was probably in his mid-30s, and at the time I was only 22, though I looked much younger. The guy stopped me and started trying to make awkward small talk. He started by asking me my name, how old I was, if and where I went to school, and why I was doing the night shift. His questions started to get weirder when he asked me if I went to parties a lot, and if I had a girlfriend. I told him I didn't, and he asked me if I've ever had a boyfriend while putting his hand on my shoulder. I immediately started walking away with the cart, but he followed me. I told him I wasn't into whatever he was thinking about. I went faster and faster until I finally made it to the storage room. He didn't follow me in. I wasn't supposed to stay back there for extended periods to avoid customer theft. I decided it would be best to just wait for him by the register so that he would ring his stuff up and leave. But I waited there for at least 20 minutes. He never came. I decided he was gone, and whether he stole the eggs or something else, there wasn't anything I could do now. I had to go to the bathroom, so I took a quick jog to the back of the store and into the employee bathroom. Moments after sitting on the toilet, my heart dropped into my stomach as I heard the bathroom door open. I choked the urge to say something like, "You can't be in here," but I didn't want to give away my position. I lifted my legs so that I wouldn't be visible from under the stall. What happened next was simply horrifying. I sat there for the longest time looking at the floor, not moving a muscle. When I finally looked up, I could see an eye peering through the crack of the stall door. I screamed. I knew I was trapped. I knew I had one shot at making a move. I grabbed the box cutter in my pocket and began sliding it through the crack of the door, forcing him to move his eye away. I took that chance to slam the stall door open in his face and hightail it out of the bathroom and all the way out of the store. I called my boss at least 5 times before he finally picked up, and I explained everything. He told me to call the cops, and so I did. Of course, the man wasn't in the store anymore by the time the cops showed up. I only did the night shift twice after that, and luckily didn't see the man again. I've worked in the K-9 unit for 9 years, and I've worked my fair share of graveyard shifts. I've definitely come across weird things at night, but I'll never forget this one night. I worked with my dog Sammy, a German Shepherd. She was 2 years old at the time and still kind of new to the job, just like me. I was driving down a road surrounded by crops when I spotted a suspicious-looking white van parked inside the crops. Both doors were open. I flashed my lights to try and draw out whoever was there. Nobody came out, so I parked and scanned the place quickly. Nobody was in sight, so I took Sammy with me to track down the driver of the van. Sammy started going crazy when we reached the trunk of the van. She was pulling so hard she almost broke off the leash. I opened the trunk to the van, and a blast of foul air hit me in the face. I almost passed out from the mix of the horrible smell and the pure shock of what I saw in the trunk. I counted 7 full body bags, each with a pair of feet sticking out at the bottom. I requested immediate backup with my radio. I heard the sound of a twig snapping nearby, and Sammy just lost it. I lost grip of the leash, and she took off into the crops. I pulled out my gun and followed the sounds of her barking. As each and every crop hit me in the face, I felt as if something would reach out and grab me. I stopped when I could no longer hear Sammy's barking, but as I stopped, the sounds of movement did not. I realized I heard movement in all directions. I had never experienced such fear in my life. I stood still as the movement around me stopped, and then, out of nowhere, I felt 2 arms wrap around my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't fight. I was going to die. And then I heard the sound of Sammy's bark, followed by the scream of the man choking me as Sammy bit down on his leg. The next thing I did is something that I still question if it was appropriate to this day. I turned around and pulled the trigger, killing the man. I grabbed Sammy by the leash and ran all the way back to the car. I could tell people were following us from behind. I managed to make it to the car safely and drive a quarter-mile down the road. I didn't stop to see which way they went. I didn't hold my ground. I fled like a coward. I cared much more about our lives than I did this job, and I'll still say that today. But it still pains me knowing how much of a coward I was. Backup arrived shortly, but the van was gone. I even failed to get the plate number on dash cam video, or even just writing it down. This was within my first few months on the force, but it made me feel like absolute shit for months to come. I, someone who swore to protect, let a van full of killers get away. Two years ago, I was called in to do the night shift from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. at 7-Eleven, since somebody called out. The store was located on a busy road in a rather quiet and rural area. During the night shift, you could expect anywhere from 10 to 20 people to come in to buy beer or something else. This one particular night, there was this one guy, mid-20s, that came in. He started making weird noises, like loud yelling noises. I assumed he had some kind of mental disability. In fact, my brother has a mental disability, so I immediately felt sympathy for the guy. He walked up to the counter without any items, with his head facing me but his eyes looking up at the ceiling. I felt uncomfortable. I honestly didn't know how to deal with it. I tried speaking with him, but he only responded in loud noises. I kept checking if he was with someone outside, but he was alone. There weren't any cars in the parking lot, so I assumed he walked. He stood there for so long, looking up at the ceiling and making noises, that I tried to get him out by handing him a bag of chips and telling him he could go. I tried finding some kind of number to call for someone to help him. Then, out of nowhere, he finally turned around and walked out of the store. I felt so horrible for the man, but at the same time I felt a bit creeped out. About an hour later, the phone on the counter rang. I picked up to hear the familiar yelling sounds from the man from earlier. It caught me off guard. I didn't know what to think other than this had to be some kind of prank. I hung up on him and was now becoming paranoid of my surroundings, constantly checking the outside through the windows. Come 4 o'clock, the person working after me came in, finally allowing me to go home. It wasn't my problem anymore. I got home and threw all my stuff on the table, ready to get to sleep, but my phone rang within a minute after entering the door. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would someone be calling at 4 a.m.? I could only imagine it was bad news. I braced myself and picked up the phone. It was the man again. I felt sick to my stomach as I listened to the loud noises he made. I struggled to slam the phone back to the receiver. All night, I felt like I was being watched, even with all the blinds shut. I could swear I heard strange noises coming from all over my house. I refused to get any sleep until the sun came up. Weeks passed, and I had forgotten about the incident until one day when I went into the basement for the first time in a while. I found that papers had been scattered all over the floor. When I went into the basement closet, I found writing on the walls. 7-Eleven had been written in Sharpie on the wall, along with the address to the 7-Eleven I worked at and my house address. The most disturbing part was that I also found various kitchen knives along with a large pocket knife sitting in the closet. What started out as seemingly just an innocent person turning into something of a prank ultimately turned into something much more horrifying. He had been living down there for God knows how long, and I'm just grateful that, for whatever reason, he changed his mind and left because I haven't seen or heard from him since. All I can say is that man is dangerously ill. few years ago, I worked the late shift at a city center club. The job wasn't particularly frightening, except for the state of the girls' toilets at the end of the night. One incident, however, will stay with me for the rest of my life. This story has two parts, one considerably scarier than the other. One night, close to closing time, I was cleaning out the ice wells and organizing bottles of spirits. A group of people was drinking and dancing nearby, and a moody-looking couple stood against the wall. A younger lad came to the bar, ordered a drink, and tried chatting with the couple. The moody guy was clearly not interested, but the young lad didn't take the hint because he was drunk and in a good mood. The young lad eventually moved on when the moody guy started telling him to get lost. The moody couple finished their drinks and looked like they were leaving. As they passed the younger lad, he waved goodbye, possibly saying something snarky. The moody guy suddenly rushed him and gave him a weak punch. The young lad avoided trouble by ducking out of the way. I instructed one of the younger staff to ensure the couple was escorted out. I thought the situation was over. About 15 minutes later, I went out for a smoke and was shocked to see the young lad with a huge slash on his head, bleeding heavily. People were panicking, trying to keep pressure on the wound and looking out for an ambulance. It was like a scene from a war movie. The door staff asked me to get some paper towels to help stem the bleeding. The young lad was trembling and saying he felt cold, which was chilling since it was a mild autumn night. The next day, I called a friend who sometimes sold me marijuana, telling him about the incident. To my surprise, he knew about it because the injured kid, David, was his boss's little brother. His boss was a big-time dealer in the area, running a serious drug operation under the cover of legitimate businesses. My friend assured me that David was alive but in bad shape. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. A guy who worked for the big-time dealer wanted to talk. I thought it would be a phone call, but he arrived at my place and asked me to drive to the dealer's flat. The flat was luxurious, and the dealer, Paul, asked me to tell the police I saw a knife, even though I hadn't. The police needed a stronger case against the attacker, and I agreed to help. Months later, I thought the ordeal was over, but I received another call from an unknown number. This time, when I went to Paul's place, it was filled with mean-looking guys. They showed me CCTV stills from a bar I didn't recognize and asked if I could identify the attacker. After looking through many images, I recognized a guy with strawberry blonde hair. I told Paul, and the room went quiet. Paul drove me home without saying much, which was terrifying. I realized I had condemned a man to a horrible fate, knowing that Paul and his gang would seek revenge. It haunts me to this day, and I try not to think about it. I work as an emergency room nurse at a large hospital, and I was working the night shift at the time. During my time on that shift, I saw many strange and shocking things. This story, however, is about the scariest thing that I've ever experienced. My shift began at 10 p.m. and went until 6 a.m. It was a large hospital in the downtown core of the city where I live. There was a whole hospital district in the area. The children's hospital was right next door, and the cancer ward was not far off. It was a warm summer night. The city was dark as I drove my car into the staff parking area. The security guard checked my badge and waved me in. I parked and walked to the entrance like I had many times before. When I stepped into the building, the somber tranquility of the night was replaced by the fast-paced hustle of a big city emergency room. You wouldn't even know it was nighttime in this place. The bright fluorescent lights shone down on the busy hallway, creating a feeling indistinguishable from daytime. The next several hours were fairly normal by my standards. The job, in general, is incredibly hectic, and the night was no different. Basically, it was a typical crazy night. However, things were taken to another level when a new patient entered the emergency room. He burst through the front entrance covered in blood, holding his abdomen. He trudged into the waiting room with a look of agony on his face. He looked to be about 40 years old with long hair. He had a short beard and wore blue jeans. One of the other nurses and I approached him and helped him into the operating room. We cut his shirt off to find the source of the blood. His flannel shirt was heavy, soaked in blood. I think it was supposed to be yellow with a plaid pattern, but it was impossible to tell. All I could see was red. Looking at his bare chest, it was easy to see the wound. It was a clear knife wound on his stomach, on the right side of his body. I quickly stopped the bleeding, and his condition was stabilized. Believe it or not, this kind of thing was actually quite common. The other nurse and I were well within our ability to handle the situation. What happened next is what really terrified me. I was alone with the man. He was conscious but laying still. The stab wound was the only serious injury, but I couldn't help but notice several other injuries on his body. They were not bad enough to require emergency treatment, but there were noticeable scratch marks on his arms and face. They were deep, long marks in rows of 3 or 4. They had surely come from fingernails. My expertise is healthcare. I'm not a detective. I don't have the skills to analyze the meaning of a certain type of wound, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But these scratches looked offensive. I was almost sure of it. This man had done something to someone. My gaze moved slowly from the man's arms to his face. He turned to look at me at the same time, and we locked eyes. We held eye contact for several seconds. My mind was racing. Does he know that I know? I thought. Just then, he tried to reach out and grab my arm. Luckily, my reflexes were faster than his, and I quickly left the room. Fortunately, the police were already there, as is common when there's a stabbing. I told the officer what I had seen, and he assured me that they would look into it. The man was treated for several more hours by my coworker, and eventually the case was turned over to the police. I never found out exactly what happened between this man and whoever else was involved, but my intuition tells me that he was bad news. All I can do is hope that whoever the other person was, they got away in better shape than he did. In 2015, I landed my dream job as a manager of an old, rustic pub with stained glass windows and ornate bar fixtures. However, a big brewery company bought the pub, and within 6 months, I lost my job. Desperate to pay rent and bills, I took a job at an off-license in the town center, working the night shift from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The off-license was busy, especially on weekends. It had a cash machine, sold expensive booze, and was a popular spot for people to buy drinks after the bars closed. On a busy night, we could have over PS 7,000 in cash on site. One Sunday morning, around 5 a.m., just before Christmas, the store had been extremely busy. It was Black Friday, and there were office parties in town. By the end of the night, I was exhausted and ready to collapse. I rested my head on the counter when I heard the door beep, signaling a customer. A man who seemed alarmingly sober walked in. Most customers at that time were drunk, but this guy was different. He kept his hands in his jacket pockets and greeted me by name, which made me uneasy. He knew where I lived and asked about my family by name. It was creepy. Then 2 other men walked in, also sober, and flanked the first guy. The first man politely asked if there was a toilet in the back of the shop. When I confirmed, he told me to go in, lock the door, and not come out for at least half an hour, showing me something heavy in his jacket. I realized they were robbing the place. They took all the CCTV USB sticks, wrecked the monitors, broke into the safe, and emptied the shelves of premium spirits. All the while I sat in the toilet, terrified and wondering how they knew so much about me. My father would usually patrol the prison a few times per shift, sometimes driving around in one of the guard trucks or keeping watch in one of the towers. However, one night, his boss told him to do a sweep of the prison chapel. It was a simple task, just walk around and make sure no one was there who shouldn't be. He walked through the yard to the chapel, the large empty space giving off an eerie vibe. Bright floodlights on the prison wall cast a long shadow of his body as he trudged past the empty basketball courts. He reached the front door of the chapel and felt a wave of nervousness come over him, though he didn't know why at the time. He pushed the large oak door open and stepped inside, flicked on the light switch, and started checking some of the small rooms at the front of the building. After a few minutes, a man walked out of the office at the back of the chapel. He seemed to be another guard, wearing the same uniform as my father. My dad didn't know this guy, but it wasn't unusual since sometimes guards from the day shift would take a night shift for extra money or to cover for someone. Still, he was confused because his boss had asked him to check the chapel. Why would he do that if someone was already there? My father asked the man, "Are you here to do a sweep of the chapel?" "Yes, I'll take it from here," the man replied. My dad stood there, confused for several seconds, then said, "Oh, okay. I'll let the boss know he left the chapel," and walked back to his boss's office in the main building. His boss looked up from his desk and said, "How did you get done so fast? You couldn't have possibly checked the whole place in such a short amount of time." Another guard was there. He said he'd check it out, my dad replied. "Okay, as long as someone checked it," the boss said. My dad was confused at this point. He figured the other guard must have been sent there by someone. If his boss didn't know, then who was that guy? 3 days later, my father was walking down the halls of the prison and stopped to look at the display case. There were various awards and old photos of other guards from times past. As he browsed through the photos, he saw something that made his heart sink. One of the pictures was a memorial to a guard who had been killed in a riot about 20 years ago. The picture was of the guard that my father saw in the chapel that night. He had never been a believer in the paranormal before, but this experience caused him to change his mind. He didn't bother to tell any of his coworkers out of fear that he'd be ridiculed, and not long after, he left the job and made a career change. Although this was a terrifying incident for him, it is one of his favorite stories to tell. I've heard it more than a few times from him, and although I wasn't sure at first, I actually do believe it. My father worked as a night guard at a large prison. He used to tell me about some of the crazy things that happened during the day fights, riots, and everything you can imagine. The night shift, however, was quite peaceful and relaxing. Once he got used to the sleep schedule, he found it to be the better option. One night, his boss asked him to do a sweep of the prison chapel. There wasn't much to it, he said. You just had to walk around and make sure that nobody was there who shouldn't be. He walked through the yard to the chapel. The large, empty space gave off an eerie vibe. Bright floodlights on the prison wall cast a long shadow of my father's body as he trudged past the empty basketball courts. He came up to the front door of the chapel, and when he did, a wave of nervousness came over him. At the time, he didn't know why. He pushed the large oak door open and stepped inside. He flicked on the light switch and started checking some of the small rooms at the front of the building. After a few minutes, a man walked out of the office at the back of the chapel. He seemed to be another guard, wearing the same uniform as my father. However, my dad didn't know this guy. It wasn't unusual, since sometimes guards from the day shift would take a night shift for extra money or to cover for someone. Even still, he was confused because his boss had asked him to check the chapel. Why would he do that if someone was already there? My father asked the man, "Are you here to do a sweep of the chapel?" "Yes, I'll take it from here," the man replied. My dad stood there confused for several seconds, then said, "Oh, okay, I'll let the boss know." He left the chapel and walked back to his boss's office in the main building. His boss looked up from his desk and said, "How did you get done so fast? You couldn't have possibly checked the whole place in such a short amount of time." Another guard was there. He said he'd check it out, my dad replied. "Okay, as long as someone checked it," the boss said. My dad was confused at this point. He figured the other guard must have been sent there by someone. If his boss didn't know, then who was that guy? 3 days later, my father was walking down the halls of the prison and stopped to look at the display case. There were various awards and old photos of other guards from times in the past. As he was browsing through the photos, he saw something that made his heart sink. One of the pictures was a memorial to a guard who had been killed in a riot about 20 years ago. The picture was of the guard that my father saw in the chapel that night. He had never been a believer in the paranormal before, but this experience caused him to change his mind. He didn't bother to tell any of his co-workers out of fear that he'd be ridiculed. Not long after, he left the job and made a career change. Although this was a terrifying incident for him, it is one of his favorite stories to tell. I've heard it more than a few times from him, and although I wasn't sure at first, I actually do believe it.